welcome to episode number 7 of the BK Show podcast. I'm actually going to keep this intro quite short because this podcast is a gem. Today I'm joined by my good buddy Taylor Holiday. I met Taylor at eCommerce Fuel Live this past February where he presented on Facebook ads. We struck up a conversation about baseball and it turned into quite the friendship. So I'm super excited to share his story with you, and it's a crazy story, starting with minor league baseball and leading to running multiple businesses that he's running today. So please enjoy this podcast with my friend Taylor Holiday. Hey Taylor, welcome to the show, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. Sorry about the you guys are gonna have to enjoy the ambiance of my home here. That is the minions running around.
I mean, I think we're all doing that right now anyway, but you're gonna test my editing skills. I'm gonna see if I can pull them out of there. We'll see what I can do. But if you hear some kids, it's just, it's part of the show.
That's good, man. Make it seem like I live in a calm, polished atmosphere. That'll be really good for my persona.
Well, look, I love hearing people's stories, but yours gets deeper, right? So I met you at ECF Live in San Antonio. Like, I had no idea who you are, if I'm going to be dead honest with you. I had no idea who Taylor Holiday was. I saw you, I think you went after Leanna or something like that. So I know Leanna Patch pretty well. And I see Taylor Holiday after, and I met a few different people, and they're like, yeah, I can't wait for Taylor Holiday. I'm like, who the heck is this Taylor Holiday guy? And then I run into you, and like one of the first things you brought up was you said something about my twin shirt, and you asked about Royce Lewis and Alex Kirilloff, and I'm like, I'm going to like this guy. I knew immediately if you knew who those people were, we were going to be friends. So like, I don't. As I got to know you, we've done a lot of stuff together since then. Playing poker, all kinds of stuff we'll get into on this show. But like, you're like peeling an onion, man. And I want to like go way back to the beginning. I don't even know whether to like do a big introduction because that might take 10 minutes to read through your LinkedIn.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. We'll do it in story form here as we go.
All right, I like that.
Yeah, man. It's funny. So my life. So I'm 36 years old, and like, the vast majority of it has been nothing to do with this whole e-commerce thing. It's been primarily baseball, right? So I grew up, played professional baseball in the Yankees organization, never made it to the big leagues, but played in the minor leagues for a minute. And that was everything. I went to, out of high school, I went to Arizona State, much to the chagrin of my family. I remember my mom literally crying because I didn't want to go to Dartmouth and play baseball and football. I wanted to go to Arizona State, and it was the worst school in America. But they had Barry Bonds and Reggie Jackson on the wall, so what the hell did I care about school? You know, all I cared about was playing sports. And I walked into my freshman dorm, and my roommate was Dustin Pedroia. And, you know, as a high school freaking athlete, like what better experience is there than that, to walk in to one of the best programs in the world and watch one of the best baseball players in the weirdest little man's body you've ever seen. And that was like, just my life was like this sort of continual happenstance of relationships that spiraled into more opportunities. And so, definitely an accidental entrepreneur, but the common thread, to borrow a pun there, in all of it is just I'm a competitive dude, and if you put me in an environment, I want to figure out how to try and be great at it.
Well, this is what I've been trying to solve with you is like, I met you, we started talking baseball, then you asked me my story, and you were like, whoa, you're pretty good at what you do too. Let's chat. And we started talking e-commerce. And then as I move along, look, I'll just give you a little intro here, right? Like, so right now you're the managing partner at Common Thread Collective, which is an agency. I don't know how many businesses you run over there.
So we have about 70 employees working with anywhere between 50 to 60 clients at any time.
Okay. You're a partner at 4x400, which is a modern day holding company building a collection of digitally native brands. So you got Slick Products. I don't even know that one. FC Goods, which is a really, really cool business. Bamboo Earth. You just acquired 31 Bits. First off, what is Slick Products?
So that we sell off-road wash kits for ATV, UTV, and dirt bike. So niche off-road wash kits. And
FC Goods, you buy up every old baseball glove in America and create.
We are the number one purchaser of vintage baseball gloves in the world.
So Bamboo Earth, I believe, is skincare, and then 31 Bits is jewelry.
That's right. Yeah, man. So obviously connected, right? Those are like most overlapping industries you've ever heard of.
A lot of cross sales in those boxes, I'm sure. And then you have like Admission, which a couple hundred businesses in there between the $3 to $30 million range, where you help them run Facebook ads.
Yep.
It's so somehow you got there, and I want to figure out how you got there, right? So
I won't even list the others because it starts to become a sort of a joke, and it starts to be in some ways unbelievable. But the reality is, like, so one of the things we learned early on in our business life. So my first company that I ever was a part of was a company called Power Balance. And we sold these silicone wristbands that athletes wore for a minute. That's a whole story, which I'm sure we'll get into some of in a second, because it's actually maybe the most interesting one of them all. But what we learned early on in that process was this idea of trying to vertically integrate or benefit from your own cost centers. So if you think about what we've done on the brand side, is that nowadays, if you went through the line items on a business's P&L, on an e-commerce business P&L, and you looked at the largest places that there are costs. So things like your rent, we own commercial real estate. Your 3PL partner, we own a 3PL. Think about an agency fee. We own agency, right? Like in anything that would represent a large portion or expenditure of your cost. I just have always hated the idea of like just giving that money to somebody else versus figuring out a way to benefit from the deployment of my own capital into other things. And so that's sort of how the system evolved, was this idea that we always wanted to build brands. We knew that's where we were headed. That like at the end of the day, that's what we care the most about. And so we just sort of thought through what are all the things that a brand needs and how do we build a system to sort of benefit from that collectively. And we just sort of keep adding to it. Like, oh, we spend a lot on data software. Well, I'm building a data tool in the background to try and replace my costs, you know? And so that's how we think about sort of continually compounding our ecosystem to try and provide as much value as we can against this mission of helping entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. So that's like how we get here is working through that system.
But you're a young guy, right? Like, I think you're younger than me.
Yeah, 36, just turned.
All right,
April.
so we're the same age, right? So
Yeah.
now you're making me feel bad. Like I got some work to do. I think you got started a little early, which is great. But I want to hear this whole journey, right? So I think you're obviously a decent ball player in high school, right?
Yep.
I think you have some pretty cool friends that come into the picture here as well, which is pretty crazy.
So yeah, I go to Arizona State out of college, and like I said, they were at the time that my freshman year I signed, they're the number one team in the country, and they've got Travis Buck ends up playing professionally for the A's. Jeff Larish plays for the Tigers. Obviously Dustin Pedroia. I mean, this team was absolutely loaded. So I'm a freshman on this team, and you know, I would say I was had some growing up to do in those years, my younger years of life. So long story short, I ended up getting booted off the team at Arizona State my sophomore year for a series of events that are probably too long of a story for now, but it involves a roommate getting a DUI, a bunch of just fighting between the older guys and younger guys, a rookie show where we like made fun of the coach's wife, like it just a bunch of stupid stuff that we did. And I still remember the day I got, so I get cut. It's picture day, my sophomore year. I show up, the coach calls me in, cuts me. I walk home. It's about 3 miles to my apartment. And I'm just like, I get on a plane, I fly home. I don't tell my parents I'm coming home. And I walk into the living room and they panic. They're like, why are you here? You know, like, they're like, your girlfriend's pregnant. What happened? Like they just had no idea why I was home in the middle of the school year. So that was tough. That was like my dream taken away for the first time. And then I ended
up. What was worse, their guesses or when you had to tell them the real story there?
Dude, it was bad. Luckily, you know, they've always been so supportive of me, but there was definitely a like, you jackass, what are you doing type stuff that I had to deal with, which was important. Like I was immature. I had a lot of growing up to do at that point, and I ended up transferring back to UC Irvine, which had just relaunched their baseball program like 4 years earlier, which is right in my hometown here in Orange County. And their head coach had just left Cal State Fullerton, where they had just won the College World Series. And my best friend in high school went and played at Cal State Fullerton, won the College World Series. Their coach ends up taking the head job at UCI, and he puts in a word for me. He's like, hey, you got to let this kid come play here. He's my best friend. Like he'll be beneficial. I end up transferring to UC Irvine, and 2 years later, like my last year, we end up eliminating Arizona State from the College World Series in UCI's first trip to the College World Series.
Nice vindication.
Yeah, 1 week after I'm drafted by the New York Yankees, and me and one of my best friends at college I went in the 19th round. He went in the 20th round to the Yankees.
So talk me through that part. You're just kind of breezing over this like it's no big deal, but like you're in college, your dream is to play Major League Baseball. What is there, 55 rounds back then or something like that?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And so you're draft eligible as 3 years out of high school, either unless you go to junior college, in which case you can get drafted at the end of each year. But once you commit to a D1 program, you're committed for 3 years. So it's I was actually a redshirt junior, so it was my fourth year. And one of the problems for me, like as a professional, was like I'm old for sports. Like after 8th grade, I didn't go to school for a year, and then I went into 9th grade. So I did like was one of those kids that sat out a year. So I graduated high school at 19.
Can we hold on? You just breeze over stuff. How do you sit out a year of school? How does that work?
Yeah. So my partner now, Josh, he and I lived together. His mom was battling cancer at the time, and we had these dreams of being, great athletes together. And he was a quarterback, and so our parents like sat us out of school for a year, and we just sort of hung out, did some working out, hanging out. While his mom was battling cancer down at the City of Hope, and he lived with me for a year, and we just didn't go to school, and then we went back into 9th grade together. Yeah, so I've definitely had an abnormal sort of educational journey. I was homeschooled up until middle, like just weird stuff, right? So we had this, this whole experience, and then where am I going with this? We were talking about getting drafted. Is that
draft? Yeah, the draft.
Yeah. So I was a redshirt junior. I was older. I was like 24 when I got drafted, which like is not ideal, right? The key is to be drafted as young as possible. So, but this was when we're in the middle of this College World Series run. So we're the number 2 seed. We get sent to Round Rock, Texas, to play the University of Texas. They're top 7 seeds. The way the college baseball works, right, is it's sort of a 64 team tournament, but they're done in like regionals. So first you play in a 4-team regional. The winner of the regionals play in what's called a super regional, and then the top 8 teams go to the College World Series. That's like the format. So it's a little bit more complicated than sort of the March Madness Sweet 16. But so we go to Round Rock, Texas. We win. So this is my week. This is my 2-week span. We win the Round Rock super regional. I'm the player of the tournament. We beat Texas in Texas. Their fans are just hating us. It was just so sweet. Then we go to Wichita, Kansas to play the Wichita State Shockers. We win game 1 of the series. That's right. Yep, there you go. That's it. You got it. Game 2, we're up 2-1 going into the 9th to clinch. First trip for UCI ever to the College World Series. There's a ball hitting the 6 hole. Our shortstop backhands it, throws it to first. I'm playing first base at the time. I stretch. I come off the bag. The guy says, well, first they call him out. Then they overturn the call. Mayhem ensues. I'm screaming. I almost get ejected. They end up tying the game. We were like, Wichita, this place is madness. These people are crazy for their college team. We end up winning in a walk-off double in the bottom of the 9th, dog pile, College World Series victory, just party our faces off that night. I get drafted by the Yankees the next day. Like it was the best 2-week span of my life. Like it was really incredible. I still like, it's hard to even put together like that as a comparable feeling for the rest of my life. So it was really special, man. And something I'll never forget for sure.
Wow. And baseball's different, right? So maybe the listeners thinking of these giant numbers people get in other sports. I would assume you signed for a
$20,000.
$20,000. Okay, yeah. So you get $20,000, and then what? $400 a week for the next?
$400 a week. I wish. It's like I think $800 a month. Oh, wow. It's abject poverty. Like outside. So what's great is you go to short season. So my short season team was in Staten Island, New York. Maybe the worst city in America, but in terms of an experience for a minor league baseball player. So if you watch King of Staten Island, it's a new movie out with Pete Davidson. So it's all about his life on Staten Island. And Staten Island, the stadium like is on the water facing the city. Okay. So you're on the island looking in at Manhattan. But in terms of like a place to play, it is so cool. And all we did every night, play a 6:30 game, done by 9:30, shower up, take the ferry into the city till 2 a.m. And it was just like, it was like the only thing I regret is that I didn't take seriously the idea that I was a professional. I was like having this incredible experience. And then what happens is you get drafted, and then like a month later, and you're playing with kids that like, some of them are 16-year-old Dominican dudes. Some are, college guys like us, high school kids. And what happens is a month after the draft, there's like paycheck day. So one day you go out to practice and you come back in and everybody has a check on their stool. Okay. And some dudes, that's like a $600,000 check.
Wow.
And some dudes, it's like a $2,500 check. And we all saddle up and we walk down to like the Staten Island First United Bank or whatever the heck it is there. And you've got like 18-year-old kids standing in line at the bank with $600,000 checks, like, and walking up to cash them. Because we don't know what the hell else are you supposed to do with it? Now I'm sure they do it all direct deposit. But like in this day, like we all literally went to a bank and the people were like, we got to get a manager. I don't really know what to do with this. And there's a bunch of kids standing in line with like thousands and thousands of dollars. And then you all go spend too much money doing something that night. But yeah, and then from there it's peanut butter and jelly and $25. So it's a weird, wild world, man.
Yeah, it's weird that you go from you're playing a whole season, you're winning, College World Series, all that stuff, and then you go and play even more baseball. And then did you go to rookie ball from there? Like you made it a couple of years in the minor leagues, right?
So it's called short season. So it's rookie ball, then short seasons. Rookie ball is level below. So short season is usually where they send college guys and guys out of the draft. So played in Staten Island, which is just a short season. So it's sort of like what they're doing right now with baseball, where it's about an 80-game season that you play into. And then from there, you come back the next year, go to spring training, and they send you either to usually low A, high A, double A, somewhere along the way. So I got sent to low A, Charleston, South Carolina. Played in another just amazing city. Met my wife. She went to the College of Charleston. And that was just like, again, so much fun. But my problem was like, I didn't understand the business of baseball. And if I could go back and do anything in my life, it'd be to explain to myself who I was within that system. Like as an older guy that didn't get paid a lot, I wasn't an asset that like they were looking to develop and invest in when they paid, Carmen Angelini, an 18-year-old kid, $1 million. So what happens is like, their allocation of resource, which is functionally like the at-bats in the game, the learning development opportunities, are going to go to the higher valued assets. And I was playing pretty well, and I was really frustrated that I wasn't getting more playing time. And there was even a moment so they play in minor league baseball, there's a winner of the first half and a winner of the second half. So they don't, because the teams have no continuity. So they like in the end of the year, the winner of the first half plays the winner of the second half of the championship. And so we're like a game out of winning the first half. And I remember our coach like called us up and they're like, Taylor's going to start today because we need to win. And I was like, what is this? What are we doing? Like what were we trying to do the other 80 games? And I had just come from this environment, college sports, that's all about teamwork and winning. And the reality is in the minor league baseball, you're sort of rooting for the guy next to you to fail because that's your opportunity to move up, right? And so it's such a different environment. And I didn't understand like the business of the assets and who gets chances and why. And what I actually needed to do in order to succeed is I needed to understand that I get no margin for error. I have to work harder than everybody else. And I have to prove my value in a different way. And I wasn't smart enough or mature enough. I didn't have like the right people around me to give me that advice. That I really wish I would have, because I think I wasted a lot of chances.
And the weird part about that is you're talking $800 a month. You're probably living in a house with 4 other dudes making $800 a month
on air mattresses.
You're 24 years old, so you have no idea what like the world holds for you, right? So like you said, you don't realize that you probably should have been the first one there every morning, the last one to leave every night, been in the weight room every day.
That's exactly right.
I think we could all want to go back and slap our 24-year-old selves. I don't think there's any doubt in that. But you have, certainly minor league ball, man. Like, do you ever like think about, cruising around? I'm sure the Yankees would welcome you to come, speak to their minor leaguers and give this advice, or do you think it's a waste of time?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never had a chance to do that. I would love to. I think for the right demographic, it could be really useful. And maybe at some point in my life, I think that would be something I could be interested in, because I do think I have a perspective that would be really valuable for these kids. Because the reality is, even if you're drafted in the 20th round, you're coming out of an environment where you were the dude. And so it's like to readjust your mindset to you're nothing, and then your odds of succeeding are still incredibly low. And you can sort of dick around with everybody and go out every night, and you can treat your professional life that way. Or you can decide that you have a dream that you actually want to work towards and build a pathway towards it. And like, I remember, dude, so you would take a bus to all these small towns. And the second you would get off the bus, what you would do is you would go to the gym. Like that was like the routine. You would go to whatever local 24-hour fitness or whatever the heck local gym there was. And every guy would just pull up on the leg extension machine and pull out their phone and do nothing. And the trainers, poor guys in minor league baseball, these minor league team trainers, nobody respects them. Nobody listens. They just sort of like ignore them. And I got caught up in being that dude, and I didn't have the margin to be that dude. I wasn't $1 million player. And frankly, it's even if you are $1 million player, that's no way to act to develop your professional self, period. Right. And I just missed the chance to separate myself and earn a chance. Like I didn't recognize the privilege of like, dude, I went in spring training and I stood next to Derek Jeter and Alex Rodriguez in the freaking training room getting wrapped every day. These are the guys I had grown up idolizing, pretending to be playing wiffle ball. And I just never made the transition to understanding what it meant to be a professional and to taking myself seriously And I think that was like a big lesson for me as I reflect on it later in life.
Yeah, there's a part of me that, I don't have the same pedigree as you do in baseball, but even looking back at where I was at 24, going to talk to somebody like that and just, trying to explain how life is a little bit different. And man, I wish I would have just figured stuff out a little earlier, I guess, but there's plenty of time left.
That's one of the number one things that even now with like my employees that like I try and offer them to the best of my ability that like the biggest thing as they are. So we have, a bunch of younger people in our company and they're working with all these rad companies. And what's easy to do is to be like, oh, the marketing manager at North Face is a real asshole. And I'm not saying that's not a specific example. It's just a metaphor, but versus like, I have relationships into one of the most incredible brands in the world filled with people who are going to be in this industry, affecting it for a long time. I should work really hard to know as many people there as possible and build relationships that are going to affect the rest of my life. And like, so going into like my next career, I sort of duplicated this mistake when we were at Power Balance and that company sort of exploded. The stories of the people I got to be around and spend time with and do business with as a 25-year-old kid, I just wasted. My network right now should be like the best in the world. And like, it's not, because I wasted so many meetings and so many opportunities not being aware of how rare it was, what I was accessing. Yeah. And that's a combination of like stupid privilege and thinking I'm like, going to have every opportunity forever and a bunch of things. But man, do I just want people to be aware of like how unique sometimes the situations that they get put into. And if you use them right, how they can affect the rest of your life, life.
So what was that transition like? I think you played 2 years in the minor leagues. Did you, teams cut 40, 50 players every single year. Was that the end of your career? Was one of those 40, 50, or did you just say, I know where my trajectory here and I want to move on?
I was walking between class. I went back to school to finish up my degree in the off season, got a call from Six. That was the guy's name who was the head of player development. And he said, Taylor, I'm letting you know that you are, as of today, no longer part of the New York Yankees. We appreciate everything you've done. My agent called me and said, hey, do you want to try and get picked up free agency or look at an independent ball? And I was like, nope, I'm 25. I need to move on. This has been a hell of a ride, but that's a wrap for me. And I started prepping thinking I was going to law school. So I was a poli-sci major with a minor in psychology, liked to talk a lot and thought I could go be a lawyer. And so that's what I was prepping for. I was literally taking LSAT classes and finishing up my degree, getting ready to apply. This was like in, so the off season, so it would have been like December, January, somewhere in that time frame, thinking that I was going to apply in the spring to law school in the fall. And my friend Josh and his brother were starting a company. They said, hey, we've got some work for you. Why don't you come to our office, print the orders off the website, and you can take them to the post office each day for us between class. So that's what I'd do. I'd show up, batch the orders out, print out my printing labels, stick them all on, package up the orders, take them to the post office, and however many there were, that's how long I worked. And that was the beginning of Power Balance. It was 3 of us in a room, and about 22 months later, we were at 60 million in revenue in 40 countries with 100 employees, and I was managing $5 million in e-commerce, 500,000 people on social, and brokering deals with Kobe Bryant in China. Just stuff that I had no business doing. I just got incredibly lucky to walk into this environment where they were like, well, nobody knows how to do that job, so why don't you figure it out? And it was like, okay, what is Magento? How do I set up a Facebook page? Like, I just got to learn. And I didn't want anybody to think I was Josh's buddy and didn't deserve to be there. And so I worked my ass off to make sure I knew more than anybody else about that topic. And again, luckily that became a valuable skill in the world, so it's just like crazy.
You just talked about relationships though, right? And so, childhood friend, it's the same thing, right? So you ended up in the right place at the right time with the right relationship. Forgive me for sounding ignorant. What is Power Balance?
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember those silicone wristbands with the hologram in them that athletes were wearing. Yeah. So that was our company. We, my friend Josh, who's still my business partner today, he and his family were always into chiropractics and Eastern medicine and all sorts of weird things. And I remember they came across these like programmed holograms that like they would send me while I was playing. I'd be like, whatever, man. And they'd be like, no, just put it in your shoes while you're playing. And I'd be like, okay, cool. And he came back, and then they had developed this like silicone version of it. And between me knowing a bunch of minor league players who became pro players, it's funny, like I still have all these old Facebook DM messages from like me and Eric Hosmer when he was a nobody, and like all these pro guys that I just had played with that became big players. But we just started seeding the product. Shaq got involved really early on. Lamar Odom got involved really early on. Khloe Kardashian, and it just went wild, dude. Like still to this day, nothing I've ever seen in terms of the growth. And this was like no paid media. There was no Facebook advertising. This was just off the back of like, it was just literally every famous person that you could think of we interacted with, and they were using the product. Like,
But it's still here, right? Like, is this still a thing? Did you guys sell it?
yeah, well, so it was purchased out of bankruptcy. So the story goes like basically zero, like 5 million, 20 million, 60 million, next year, 40 million bankruptcy. Because what had happened basically is we had committed ourselves from a marketing standpoint. We had the naming rights deal of the Power Balance, or of the Sacramento Kings Arena. It was called the Power Balance Pavilion. We were the title sponsor of the Rock and Roll Marathon. We had deals with, at one point, all 4 MVPs of the major sports. We had like a multi-million-dollar deal with Kobe Bryant in China. We had like all these committed dollars that, even though, so what happened, about 60% of the business was international distribution. And we were a small team when we started, but this product was like cocaine in countries like Brazil. Like these little packs of stickers that you could make for sub 50 cents would sell for like $80. Like packs of stickers. And it became such like a crazy moneymaker in all of these countries that we had these distributors that were buying massive amounts of product, but we couldn't control what they were saying or who they were selling it to anywhere. It was just, we completely lost control of the message and the claims and what people are making. And so there was a set of lawsuits. We were actually in a transaction to sell the company in, I want to say it was like December of 2009. And I remember exactly where I was. I was walking on the Dana Point Harbor, and I pulled out my phone, and PB scams was the number one trending topic on Twitter. And Gizmodo had written this article about claims that were being made in Australia about the product. And it set off the people buying the company pulled out, cost us, I don't know, maybe 80 million bucks. And the next year it just all fell apart from there. Now, so like one, we made every mistake in the book. There was a lot of things we really did wrong that we should have understood more. And two, like just in general, the efficacy, the reality of the product for me now looking back on was like just willful naivete in the middle of a really exciting run that like we should have known better than to be in some of the places we were. But
it sounds like a wild ride, right? Like you guys, did Josh have any experience before that?
No, Josh. So we went to high school together. He played quarterback at Yale. But like, so Josh now is married to Natalie Golbis. She played on the LPGA tour forever. And then the way that we met was I was in charge of the athlete team. So we had scheduled an event. So Vitor Belfort was one of our athletes, and he's a Brazilian UFC fighter, and he was fighting Anderson Silva for the light heavyweight title in this fight. So we had, Brazil was one of our biggest distributors. So we flew our Brazilian distributors out, and we got a bunch of our athletes to go to this fight. It was me, Josh, my buddy Ryan, and Tyler, who were working with us at the time, Elvis Andrews, Vernon Davis, Natalie Golbis, and like 4 other people that we had that go to this fight together. So there's like, we bring our athlete team out. So Josh meets Natalie at this event. They end up getting married many years later, but we go to this event. So it's the main event. We got all our Brazilian distributors there. We're going nuts. And Anderson Silva, fight starts. Anderson Silva, 6 seconds in, face kick to the head. Vitor Belfort dead. End of fight. Bro, it was like the most ridiculous. We're like, we're never doing the UFC again. We're done with this. We're done.
Dude, and it was nasty too. It was a front kick, right? Like just straight up front kick, heel to the face.
Done.
Vitor just melts.
People from Brazil, yeah, we're getting ready to go. Boom, 6 seconds in, over.
Yeah.
It was wild, dude. Wild. So it was that. And then it would be like, we got really like this was, peak A-Rod. I remember there was a Super Bowl Sunday in Miami. I fly out to Miami. We go to A-Rod's house because we're working on a deal with him. So I'm in A-Rod's house in Miami talking to him through the product. That night we go out. My buddy gets really, really drunk. The next day we come back because A-Rod is filming a hitting DVD with Kevin Long, the current then Yankees coach, in his batting cage in his front yard. And he's like, hey, I want you guys to come watch. I'm going to be filming my DVD. So A-Rod's house in Miami. It's sort of like on the water on Star Island or whatever the heck it's called. And there's like the batting cage strip, and then he's got a kid's playground right off the back of it. So we're in there. It's hot as hell. It's sweltering, right? It's like February, but it's still just sweaty. And so we go in, and we're sitting there watching him hit, go through this DVD, this instructional. I'm like sitting watching A-Rod talk about hitting in his freaking house. And then I see my buddy get up and walk outside, and he just goes into A-Rod's kids' playground and just throws up everywhere at A-Rod's home, and then comes back in and just sits down like nothing happened. And later it was just like, I mean, the stuff. And then it'd be like, hey, Jay-Z, A-Rod would call us and be like, Jay-Z wants to talk. So we would like fly to New York and go to, the Rockefeller Center and go sit with Jay-Z in his office and talk to him about business. And I'm like this kid, I'm like, meh, just like no idea what I'm doing, just sitting there in these rooms. And this is what I talk about when I'm like, I didn't have nearly the wherewithal to be like, oh, I should probably like get to know these people and like have a lasting relationship here. And so, man, it was just stuff like this over and over again. Like the reason we ended up with the Power Balance Pavilion at the Kings Arena is because the Maloof brothers, who were the owners at the time, were the owner of the Palms Casino in Vegas. And Ryan Sheckler, who was one of our athletes, like was really close with the Maloof. So we would have these events in Vegas at the Palms Casino. And we would get to know the Maloofs, and that led to like end up we're freaking have the naming rights deal of the basketball arena, just the dumbest stuff. Like, but man, it was wild, and it was like just this giant learning lesson of how not to do anything. But but what it awoke in me was like I had no career objective. I was going to be a lawyer, and I didn't know what entrepreneurship was. I had no idea what marketing was. I never cared about it, and it sort of completely derailed me into this thing of just learning everything I could about all of this stuff and just having this playground to just learn and make mistakes and figure it out. And
that's a little more than a playground, man.
Bro, it was just wild. And it was like, I'm so endlessly thankful for, like you said, having friends that like, trusted me enough to give me a chance to do stuff. I didn't have any reason, like I didn't have a deserved reason to be in the room. And I think that sort of formed a lot of like, even my beliefs of how we treat our people and these things, which is just that like when you give someone an opportunity, like their potential capacity, like you can believe about them what they don't even know yet about themselves. And I think that's what I felt like people had a vision for me in that way. And it just changed my life a lot. And so that's like when we think about our mission for our ecosystem of helping entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, it's all born out of that idea of like, man, we can really offer into people out of the lessons and mistakes that we've learned along the way.
So I'm a big believer in like, and I was telling you before we got on the call, like product is all that matters, right? Having the best product. So I remember this era, now that I'm looking on my other screen here at Power Balance. I remember the bracelets you used to wear with like the two balls on the end, the baseball necklace. I used to rock one of those baseball necklaces. Like, is there any science behind any of that stuff about, balancing your chi or whatever that? I don't even remember what they were supposed to do back then.
So there's like, fighting was the other big one. That's probably
that's the necklace I had. Yeah, for sure. I definitely have pictures of me wearing those.
Yeah. And it's all, blood flow. And we actually spent a good amount of time trying to we worked with the University of North Carolina for a long time to try and determine the efficacy and try and validate any of it. But, man, I put it in the category of chiropractics. I put it in that, like, there's people who believe really strongly, and they'd probably be offended even that I said that. It's probably honestly a little further Eastern med than even that. But it's in the category of people who wear crystals and things like that. So what I can say, where I've landed with it is that I don't believe that there's any legitimate efficacy. I think there's an incredible placebo effect that takes place. But I do believe that the people involved genuinely believed in the efficacy of what they were offering and did their best to be honest about the things that they thought were true. There was no attempt at manipulation, but the message got out of control globally in a way that was definitely beyond what we had intended.
Was Power Balance the first? I guess I don't remember the trajectory of it. I remember people wearing those bracelets and, like you said, the necklaces. And what was the first thing that came out that was, the balancing ion technology or whatever?
I don't really know. That's a good question. There was so many of them, to be honest. But we were definitely the largest. And if you look, like, literally, like, there's not in that time, like, everything from, like, I remember the day that, let me share my screen just so you can see what I'm looking at. Oh, like if you Google like Kevin Durant Power Balance, there's a Sports Illustrated cover, his first Sports Illustrated cover, and he's just front and center, like and it's just straight.
Yeah, I googled Vitor Belfort power balance, right? And there's like a bunch of YouTube videos here. I kind of remember that. Nowadays they can't wear any promotion, but I remember having all kinds of weird stuff on their shorts back then.
Yeah, it was our team at the time. Like the athlete team that I built was Derrick Rose, Drew Brees, Kevin Durant, Shaquille O'Neal, Matt Kemp. Who else did we have? Vitor Belfort, Ryan Shuck. Like, it was just the stupidest. Like, it was a roster at that time that was like as good as Nike in terms of athletes, because what we discovered, and this became like a driving thing that led to Kalo for us anyways, which was like our next foray into silicone accessories, was we learned that the way that like athlete endorsement deals work, like if you have an endorsement deal with Nike, it basically covers head to toe equipment. Like for most of these guys that are big name Nike deals, right? So most of them can't do deals for any other additional accessory they could wear on their body. But at the time, there was no deal structure for the wrist. Like there was no prohibited category. So it didn't matter if it was LeBron James or Kevin Durant or Cristiano Ronaldo, the highest paid athletes in the world, they could still do deals with us because none of their Nike deals at the time precluded the wrist, because there were no products category for athletes in that spot. And so it became this white space. It's the same thing that ended up happening with Kalo, where we were able to get into a product category where none of the people were precluded from wearing a wedding ring in the same way they weren't a wristband. And so that became sort of our secret sauce into all of these relationships. It was just free money. So my negotiating tactic for these guys was like, hey, you don't have another offer for your wrist. Will you take 25 grand, Drew Brees? And it's like, well, yeah, sure. What do you want me to we got deals with everybody because there was no competing offer. It wasn't like tennis shoes, right?
So was it just like your young bravado that allowed you to reach out to these people? Because I'm sure there's a ton of people listening who are like, I want to work with Shaq. I want to work, you know what I mean? Like, so how did you even initially start reaching out? These are some big names you're mentioning here.
Bro, like literally it was like, I would call their agents to start. Like, well, one of the things that happened early on, so Shaq became an equity partner, okay? So at this point, like early on, and that was through a relationship, with like a combination of his agent at the time, just a random connection. And Shaq is a business dude. Like he loves to do business deals. And so he was one of the first athletes really looking at equity deals. And so we were able to get him to take, I think he had like 5% of the company or something at one point. And so that was really this foundation where we could use him as an entry point. So it gave us sort of validity to be like, I could call Drew Brees' agent and be like, hey, I want you to check this out. It's a non-category prohibited product. It's, it's easy to wear, potential game impact, and Shaq's involved. And so it got me a lot of the meetings. And then from there, it was just like we seeded the product to everyone, everywhere, all the time. And it was so cheap to make that we sent it to everybody. Like, and that was one of the main keys, is that in every locker room and anywhere in the country, so everybody was familiar with it. And at some point, it's just a thing and it kind of looks cool, so they would put it on. And it would just be like, so we would have this book. So basically what would happen is like every time an athlete was spotted anywhere wearing it, we just had a book and we take the pictures and we put it in there. So if I go to a meeting, I'd just be like, yeah, look at, and it was like everybody. So it was one of those things where it became normal and expected, and everybody wanted a piece of the category as it was just taking off. It was just wild. It was just wild.
Well, I'm going to need to pick your brain on this. I think I told you the other night on poker, I'm probably going to take some equity in a protein company with pre-workouts and stuff. And we just recently started working with Big E from the WWE. So he's one of the biggest guys there, tag team champion. He's a huge presence, right? And so yeah, I'm going to have to talk to you how we can use Big E to start talking to other people and be like, obviously if he's involved, more people want to be involved. And
you just sort of like, it's this thing where you sort of just, in a lot of ways, you're representing the idea. Like we were joking about, not to name drop anybody here, but like we were talking the other day, somebody was, representing partnerships and selling their deal, right? Like we do on our pitch night, poker night, someone came and gave a presentation and they were showing off partnerships. And then it was like, do you really have those partnerships? And they were like, no, but we're going to have the part,
Right.
And so look, there's always this dance where you get a domino in place and you're using it to get more dominoes in place. And you're sort of playing this game of like, yeah, hey, look, Shaq's really interested. We're trying to get, and you're working through it in a way that's like you're trying to build compounding relational value. In a lot of ways, it just happened that way, like so fast. And suddenly it got to a point where everybody was involved. And then it was just like doors opening everywhere because it was just like we had the portfolio at that point.
So did you have a flat rate? Did you have like how many people were on equity, number one? And then did you have a flat rate you went to everybody else at and you were like, I need you to wear this in public at all times for this rate for a year?
Yeah, totally. So I think Lamar Odom was the only other athlete, him and Khloe Kardashian, because they were married at the time, were the only other two equity players in the, and I think LO might have even invested. I don't remember the exact terms, but he had an equity piece. And then everybody else was just a cash deal. And the way that we would do the deals, is like we had Derrick Rose. So Derrick Rose, this was the year Derrick Rose was the NBA MVP. He was on a $25,000 cash deal, paid over a year. And it was like my only context at the time, like I didn't have any experience negotiating, I thought about it in terms of like sports contracts. So I thought like, I'm going to try and get Derrick Rose on a 2-year deal. And so it was like, I got Derrick Rose 2 years, $25,000 a year with like incentives relative to his performance. That's literally like what we did. And then it was
what year is this, by the way?
So what year did he win the MVP? So Derrick Rose MVP.
But this is like pre-Web 2.0 really taking off, right? Facebook
totally.
was around, but like I don't even think they had acquired Instagram at this point you're talking about, right? Like so, because 25,000 seems like nothing. Like people are charging $10,000 to post an Instagram post nowadays.
Exactly. That's what was, and that got me a shoot day. Okay. That got me use of likeness in retail. We did a custom product with him. And it got me a lot. To be frank, with $25,000. Drew Brees, $50,000 deal with Drew Brees, I think is what Drew was on. I think he was our highest. Matt Kemp, $25,000 deal. And what happened was as soon as I locked in like Derrick Rose at $25,000, then that was the deal. It was like, that's what I went out with, was like, hey, look, Derrick took $25,000 for a day. You've got no other competition. We'll come to you. We'll make it super easy. You don't have to do anything else. I'm in and out. It's one day of work for $25,000. That was like the framing of it. And then we would use the use of likeness. And the real key for us in those days was we were trying to get Dick's and we were trying to get all the big retailers, right? And they wanted to see the athletes. And so for them, then it was all about putting these guys on point of sale. It was like putting them, it wasn't really about the web, right? Like it wasn't about their social following or trying to create Facebook ads. It was just like, could we take their face, go show it to Dick's, get them to write a giant PO and put them on point of sale at the different locations. And like, that was the game, you know.
So you're just flying by the seat of your pants,
bro. We were just making stuff as we go. One of my favorite stories was we were sitting around one day watching the World Series of Poker, and we're like always looking for ways to get our product into the public light. And so we're like, dude, you know where they show people's wrists a lot? Because that was always the challenge. Was like, how do you get a zoomed close up? Even in photography and stuff, it was always hard to like shoot face and wrist at the same time. And we're like, you know where they show hands all day long? And this was like peak World Series of Poker. Okay. So it's the November 9, right? The year 9 millionaires was the biggest, World Series of Poker ever. And there was going to be 9 millionaires. And so what they did is they would play the tournament right through, but this year they were taking a month-long break and then they were going to play the final table, the November 9 in November. So me and my buddy were like, let's go to Vegas and get all these guys to wear product. And like, this was literally how we rolled, was like, hey, Josh, who was our boss, like, can we drive to Vegas, give us $2,500 to pull off the deal, to stay there and come back. And that's all we want. And so we had a big Sprinter van. We loaded it up. We drove to Vegas. We like literally on the way, we're trying to get a hold of these guys. And there's no social media or anything. So it's like literally like looking up online directories to find their parents and call them. And so that's literally how we would get a hold of these. And so we get there, we get a meeting with 4 of the 9 guys, okay, of the November 9 World Series of Poker. So we come in and 4 of them are there and 3 of them are like, we were offering $2,500. And they're like, dude, we bet that on a hand of blackjack, get out of here. And one dude is like, yeah, I'll do it. And so we're like, great, here's your product. And all we want you to do is make sure that you roll your sleeves up and every hand, like it's visible for us. And so we're like, we'll stay and watch. And like, we've played a ton of poker. Those were like peak party poker days, right? Like this was like the heyday. And so we're like, this is going to be so fun. But literally, dude, if you sit and watch a final table of poker, it is boring as shit. Like you are sitting there for hours watching people primarily fold. And it's nine-handed and it's for a grip of money. So they're taking their time. And we sat there for 5 straight days, 20 hours a day, sitting in the freaking Rio like this, watching poker. And the person that wore the bracelet, Joe Cata. And so Joe Cata took the $2,500 he ends up winning the World Series of Poker.
Nice.
The kid sucked out on so many rivered sets. It was unbelievable. And the whole time, so he puts on the World Series of Poker bracelet over the freaking top of his power balance like this. And so the picture, if you Google Joe Cata World Series of Poker, he's holding up $10 million stacks of cash, and it's the power balance bracelet and the World Series of Poker bracelet. It's still freaking hanging in the Rio. And that night, the two of us, we partied with his family in this ridiculous suite, and we were like in with his crew. And it was just like the wildest 5 days marketing boondoggle of all time.
That sounds insane, man. Like
this was like what we did. We had no idea what to do. Like we didn't have a playbook from a marketing class. So it was just like, oh, that looks cool. Let's try and go do that.
I'm trying to find a photo. I want to make this the cover of the podcast, man. You'll have to send me that.
Yeah.
But like, that's insane, man. You're just flying by the seat of your pants. And this all happened in 2 years, and then you just go bankrupt by having too many deals, or that one article comes out and
yes, it was like as fast as it went up, it went down. Like it was just absolutely wild.
So did you guys obviously you filed bankruptcy, somebody bought it out. Like what happens to you guys as business owners at that point?
So I left. So I was at that point, I owned a very tiny piece of it. I was the first employee. I didn't have a big equity stake.
More or less than Shaq?
Less than Shaq. I was smaller than Shaq. So check out that photo I just sent you, by the way, in the chat. But okay, so I along the way, our agency of record that I hire, that is my hire, is Zubin Malavi at Lucid Fusion, who Gary Vee just acquired and made the head of VaynerCommerce. Okay. So Zubin and I become really close friends, and I would just mess with him all the time. I'd be like, dude, why are you running an agency? That's the dumbest thing in the world. Like all you're doing is building other people's stuff. Like let's build something. You have all these talented people. And so I remember we took a trip together to San Francisco to some, I don't know, Web 2.0 conference or something. And he was like, all right, fine. He's like, let's do this. You come, I'll give you access to all my people and some money, and you can build a lab inside of our agency, and it'll be like you can use it to create passive revenue. That'll be your goal. Non-service based passive revenue for the agency. And I was like, cool, I'll do it. So I ended up leaving Power Balance before everything went nuts. But dude, all those relationships, like still to this day, like, so at the time Jordan Palmer, who was my other business partner for CTC, he was running a company called Rock Software. And Rock Software was a mobile app development company for athlete games. So they did like the Ocho Cinco game. They did a Mike Tyson game, Cristiano Ronaldo game back in like those early app days. And their head of sales was a guy by the name of Grant Zanini, who like I brokered a deal with to put Power Balance into the Chat Ocho Cinco game as like a power up. And now Grant's my VP of operations at CTC. So it's just like those relational connections spilled all the way through. But I ended up leaving and going into this agency, and that was my first initial foray into agency life and some software development stuff. And again, was just handed a playground to just try and figure stuff out. And just got to learn a bunch of stuff about sort of software and development. This was back when like Facebook apps were a thing. We spent a bunch of time trying to build Facebook apps, like just a bunch of interesting things along the way, man.
So like you leave there, right? The business goes bankrupt, but it sounds like the same people moved into what I apparently skipped over this in your intro. You're a partner at is it Kalo or Quelo?
Well, so we sold. Yeah, we just sold Kalo recently, but yes. So,
but that's kind of a big deal too, right? Like that was a huge thing.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. So what happens is, so basically along the way, we like silicone production became a core competency. Like we learned everything about injection molded silicone because that's everything that we made. And our manufacturer there was like a big part of the business. And that's who ended up buying the business out of bankruptcy because he was owed a bunch of money on product and he was the primary, like a debtor. He ended up acquiring the business and he still owns and operates it today. But when we went back, and my brother and his partner came to me with the idea for Kalo. They both were young dudes that had just gotten married, hated wearing the wedding ring. My brother was a big meathead, loved to work out all the time. And the other guy worked on motorcycles and all this stuff. And so they came to us with this and I was like, well, let's go to Troy and Denny because they know how to produce silicone. So we were like, let's ship our metal wedding ring to our old manufacturer and like get them to make some silicone wedding rings. So that's how we sort of launched Kalos, because we had all these connections to silicone production. And sort of a very similar story, only this time through a different medium. This was like how we got into Facebook advertising was, Kalo was the absolute perfect e-commerce product. It's got a massive margin. It costs nothing to produce. It never goes bad. It costs nothing to ship. And Facebook had this magic advertising ability to target people based on relationship status. So we could go after married and engaged CrossFitters, married and engaged firefighters, married and engaged police officers, married and engaged, carpenters. Like we just went niche by niche by niche, relationship status, Facebook ads, and just took off. So that business, we sold $100 million of silicone wedding rings in 4 years. It was insane.
But you had some partnerships there too, right? If I remember right, wasn't there some athletes wearing that as well?
Yep. So same sort of playbook. We took it and we went to all those same sort of connections in the basketball world. So you can see LeBron, Steph Curry, a ton of these guys, Mike Trout, Chris Bryant, Bryce Harper, just went through the same Rolodex, same set of relationships, same playbook.
So you didn't burn anything in the Power Balance one?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I didn't as much. I was able to maintain a lot of it because I wasn't like at the core of, I didn't end up owing Kobe Bryant a bunch of money personally. So I was able to maintain some of my a lot of my relationships with the agents and people along the way. So I wasn't at the core of it as much in terms of when it all went real bad. But a lot of that, there wasn't like any sort of residual damage for me personally. So we were able to go back to a lot of these people, and that the gatekeepers were, because the athletes sort of had cycled through. It wasn't worthwhile going to Derrick Rose anymore, but it was the agency relationships that primarily, no offense to D Rose, who I love.
That's
he's
terrible.
a baller, by the way. Great story someday to tell you about how after a photo shoot, he took a car that we had rented him and disappeared shopping in Beverly Hills for 8 hours and cost me a grip of money. But that's another story for another day. But yeah, so it was just, that was sort of there for us. And then you combine that with then Facebook advertising, and it was like same sort of just rocket ship and that we did with Kalo. And that was like our second foray into really building a brand while we were simultaneously then developing the agency in our ecosystem. So that was like where we learned a lot of the skills that now apply more into the sort of modern e-commerce development was building Kalo.
So I'm assuming you owned a little more of Kalo than you did Power Balance. And then who was involved in that? Like you mentioned briefly, Jordan Palmer, right? Like he's a former NFL player. He's kind of a big deal, right? And I know you started an agency with him later on, but who was part of Kalo that you're still working with today, right?
Yeah, so my brother and his partner Ted were the co-founders. They owned 2/3 of the business or so, and then the other third was broken up between myself, Jordan, Josh, who's my other business partner, and then a couple of our lawyer, I think, had a piece of the business, and a smaller group of people. So CTC, the collective group, we owned about 15% of that business, and then so that was like our group that we went with. And what happened was when we started CTC, we were starting Kalo and CTC basically at the same time. And so our first office was this tiny little 100 square foot office above this bakery in Orange, California. And we're I let my brother, me and Corey, who were the two guys that were working at CTC at the time, Jordan was in and out of the NFL all the time. So he would get signed by the Jags, then released. And then 2 months later, the Bears would call. And so basically we would watch every Sunday. And if a quarterback got hurt, it'd be well, Jordan's probably going to head out. So that was our life for a little while, was just him being in and out. So we rented this room and we're yeah, Casey, why don't you, my brother was a bartender at the time. And us getting that office was the impetus for him to quit his job and go full time on Kalo. So it was the three of us in this tiny little room starting these businesses together as we went. And so we just kept growing together all along the way. And at one point, at our peaks, they had about 100 employees. We had about 70 employees, and we were in the building that we're in now together. So it was super fun to sort of walk those roads together. They were equity partners in CTC. We were equity partners in Kalo. And so it was a very sort of a intertwined growth story.
And so you cut your teeth on Kalo as far as Facebook ads go, right? And that was probably back in the heyday too, that I unfortunately missed out on.
Yeah, God, the biggest mistakes we made was we were naive to how good it was. It's hard to make decisions contextually when you're in the middle of something like that. When it's a gold rush, in the way that it was for Kalo for a while, where it was like the only thing that kept us from making more money was not adding more zeros in the ad account. Like it was just our inability to make a good decision about how hard we should push and how much margin was appropriate. Like we were making so much cash for a while that it was literally like, what percent profit should we make? And that we didn't have an answer, and we didn't know how long it would last. Like it was hard to contextualize what should the budget for ad spend be next month. Like it was like, and so it'd be like, the idea that it would go from 50,000 to 100,000 seemed wild. It seemed like foolishness. Like it was hard to really understand, even though like what it should have been is $2 million. Like we just had we didn't have context for the moment we were in. And so we missed being way bigger than we even were.
You probably couldn't think that big back then anyway, right?
Totally. We had no context for it. We didn't have any idea how to think about what was happening in a way that was like consistent with the opportunity. Like we just didn't get it. We didn't know.
So you start Common Thread Collective, right? That's your agency. At the same time as Kalo, you start this with Jordan Palmer and some other guys. Did you have anything else going on back then, or like was this a straight flow? Like you're baseball player into Power Balance, which is just bananas, and then right into Kalo.
I mean, like I had twins, so there was that. But in terms of business stuff, I do. Yeah, the streets are littered with failed sort of little upstarts and ideas along the way. But these were our core businesses, and the agency at the time, to be clear, what it was like we were doing anything and everything for people. So like one of the things that we started the agency off of the back of is we had become friends with the founders of a company called Evo Shield. Okay, so Evo Shield. They make sports protective equipment. Like if you've ever watched a baseball game, the elbow guard that every player is wearing or the shin guard that every player is wearing is Evo Shield. Or like if you ever see a quarterback take their pads off after a game, the rib guard they're wearing is Evo Shield. And basically what they had created was it starts as a soft gel, and then you crack it and it triggers a chemical reaction that custom hardens to the shape of your body. And it was this brilliant product. And these two guys, they were baseball guys, so that when we were running Power Balance, we became friends with them. And so when we left, basically what happened is they hired us to basically be their de facto head of marketing. So I was basically, as an outsourced sort of CMO, running marketing for Evo Shield. And that was like our first agency gig was basically we would fly to Bogart, Georgia once a month and meet with their team and work on ideas, build them. We built them a blog and a new website and began advertising for them. And we did deals, like we did a big shoot. This was back when RG3 was like at his peak. And so we went out to one time to Maryland for a shoot with RG3. And that's where we met the video production team on there was a group called Hype Media. They were based in San Diego, and their CEO, Ian Harris, and I, that was the first time we ever worked together. We became really close friends, worked together on projects for like the next 4 years. And then CTC ended up acquiring Hype Media. And now Ian is sort of like, the largest shareholder in CTC with me now. So just so many just like series of like compounding relationships that led to where we're at.
So talk me through that. You mentioned earlier on that you just started acquiring pieces that you needed as you move forward, right? And so you just mentioned one, like you needed to be able to build media. I know you have your own little playground now in California there, but like talk to me about some of the pieces you grabbed along the way as Common Thread Collective just started growing as an agency. And you've worked with some big names. Are you able to talk about any of these big names as well?
Yeah, totally. So that's sort of a perfect example where it was like one of our biggest line items in the agency was like we would do these projects where clients would hire us and 40, 50, 60% of the margin would go to the production company to pay for the actual production of the assets because we were just handling the strategy. And so it was actually a project that Ian and I were working on for North Face. So we got hired to do this project for North Face where they were creating this new line of product called what was it called? Urban Expedition or something. They were basically trying to figure out how to take their mountaintop gear and make it cool for the city. And so we did this project where we found all these like urban adventurers, like people who go find abandoned buildings and climb through sewers and in San Francisco. And we built this map of all these secret underground locations. And we went with them. Ian and his team flew up and spent 2 days climbing through sewers, shooting all this content for North Face. And he and I would fly up there for a pitch. And then on the way home, we'd sit at Chili's at the San Francisco airport or the Oakland airport and just dream about like, well, what could we do together? What if we could combine content and distribution in a way that would, give us the full story so you could actually see what happens with your content and we could actually have a say in how it gets made. And so that was like, we worked with TaylorMade. We worked with a company called Skills. We did a bunch of stuff together we shot all of Kalo's content, and Ian was just our guy. And so that was a perfect thing where like, for me, I'm looking at the way our company makes money and I'm going, so much of it is getting sent over here to this production company. Like, what if we could do this together? And so that was the first sort of big play that we made as an agency to combine and acquire a business and bring that side into what we do. So that's sort of an example. Another one is just like, we ended up buying the buildings that we're in because rent was the biggest part of our line item. Like we ended up built like at Kalo early on when we were shipping a ton of product. So my brother and his wife would ship all the product out of their living room. And then eventually that became too much. And we found a friend who had a battery distribution company. Basically he would like buy batteries from overseas, bring them into a warehouse and like wholesale them. And we're like, hey, can you ship our rings for us? And he's like, yeah, I could build a workflow for that. And eventually it became such a big part of his business that we went to him and we're like, hey, like we're basically most of your revenue. So either we're going to do this together and launch a 3PL and we're going to like build a business together and we'll bring in more clients to it, or we're going to take our business somewhere else. And so we just basically vertically integrated. We created a company called Left Brain Logistics. That's a 3PL company that does pick, pack, and ship for e-com. And basically it was built off of that being Kalo's biggest line item, right? So it was just like that kind of thinking of how do we take, our cost centers and turn them into areas of opportunity has sort of spawned the ecosystem that we have now.
So what does that look like when you go to someone who, I mean, it kind of sounds like a strong arm, right? Like
totally.
you're either going to do what we want or we're going to take our business elsewhere. What does that even look like? What kind of relationship does that look like on as far as like a partnership goes, right? Like, are you offering equity? Are you taking equity in his business? Are you just merging together? What does that look like?
Yeah. So in this case, what it was like, look, Jeremy, like we're all of your revenue. We like what you're doing. We think you do a great job. We don't want to leave, but it doesn't make sense. We think we could do this cheaper if we were to build it in-house. So, and another option is we create a business together and we become partners in it. So I think the cap table is like basically 50-50 between the ownership of Kalo and Jeremy and team at Left Brain. And it was like, all right, so we're going to launch this business. You will get a 10-year contract with Kalo or whatever it is. I don't know the exact terms of what it was, but like basically a commitment to have the revenue of the Kalo 3PL or the Kalo contract. And then we, CTC, will bring clients in and make recommendations for more businesses to come in. And then we moved into a building together. So then we like moved into a space. And so strong arming, leveraging, whatever the right terminology is, it was an attempt for us to come together and do something bigger than what either of us were going to do on our own in a way that we worked hard to try and make mutually beneficial and nobody went into disgruntled. It was like, yeah, this is an opportunity. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, I just love to hear deal structure, right? Like there's a million ways to do different deals. I'm a big fan of Business Lunch podcast with Roland Fraser. He talks about, every week it's a different way he's talking about doing a deal. And so I love hearing how you do this. I'm trying to do the same thing with one of my brands. I'm trying to buy my competitor right now or just merge together. So we, kind of corner the market. And so I love hearing how you do all this stuff. So what other, like some big brands that you worked with that, like I think when I met you, one of my consulting clients, you were either just finished running their ads or you were running ads for a company that I was actually modeling you. I was like, I'm using your ads right now to show them how to run ads. So is there anybody out there that
you're talking about Theragun, right?
Yeah. Like, is there anybody out there that you're the proud of the work you did, where somebody can go to their Facebook ad library and check out some of your work?
Yeah, I mean, a ton of them. I'd say a few of the ones right now that I'm just like, I think they're one, like our job on the agency side, like the reality is we are as good as the brand, like I believe that tactically we are as good as anybody in the world. Like we understand Facebook ads, but we still can't make bad product good to your point earlier in the beginning, right? So what works really well is when we get to work with incredible entrepreneurs and founders who care about their product, are interested in making it awesome, who have a great creative vision for what they're doing. And we get to work with a lot of those. Like today, CTC just did a webinar today with, one of the out of the Theragun relationship, and this is just sort of continuing. So we started with Theragun at $0 when they were at $0 in revenue, and worked with them up through almost probably 20 million in revenue. That product was incredible. And one of the people we worked with, it was one of their early founders, was a guy by the name of Matthew Murray. And now Matthew Murray is the COO of Love Wellness alongside Lauren Bosworth. And that relationship has spilled over, and we've been with them since day one through a very similar journey. And Matthew's an incredibly smart dude, and Lo has a vision for a product to care for women in a way that's super unique. And working with people like that is rad. And so we're super proud of the work we've done there. The super fun one, just because it's like sports in LA and local. We work with a shoe company called APL. That's just like, they are just smashing. And it's a family brand. So like they're the family that runs it, literally mom, dad, and twin kids that went to SC, and he was one of the original people involved in building the Reebok pump. Like, they just get the shoe game in a really unique way. And so we've been with them now for a few years. Dude, there's been so many stories over the years. So like getting to work with, my favorite thing is working with the founders. Like, we work with a founder by the name of Edward Wimmer, who runs a company called Road ID. That's like a fourth generation owner of this family business. And the fourth generation is probably overstated, I think, but it's been a family business for a long time. And he's just an amazing dude. Just like an awesome human to be around, and genuinely cares about our business success. And there's lots of them, man. We get to work with lots and lots of cool people. And, you know, we've worked with, we spent a long time working with ColourPop, who I think is one of the most underrated secret e-commerce. They're a multi-nine-figure e-commerce business that very few people know of. That's really the powerhouse behind Kylie Cosmetics and a lot of the actual production that works out of there. So we've seen like the highest levels of the machinery of like, and that's cool. And it's fun to see the giant numbers and work on ads that just work every time you put them up, no matter what, because the brand's so strong. But during that duration of that relationship, we had 4 different marketing managers, because they would all leave and go to Goop in the next thing. And it's like, there's no relational equity with the founder. And so part of our commitment to the phase of the business that we're after, the 0 to 30 million, is where we sit, is about being connected to the entrepreneur. And those are our favorite relationships.
So that's a great segue, right? Like, you guys, you have an agency in Common Thread Collective where you're working with these bigger brands. And you just talked about how much you love the founder, how much you actually love these missions that people have, right? And so I'm going to guess that that's what spawned Admission, so that you could work with more people one-on-one and really help founders. Can you talk me through how that spawned out of Common Thread Collective?
So if you think about the market of, if I say I work with 0 to 30 million, if I were to draw a graph, okay, and the y-axis is revenue, okay, and the x-axis is the number of, or sorry, the y-axis is the number of companies, and the x-axis is revenue, okay? So you can imagine that. And then I were to draw sort of like a curve that the bulk of the market, the highest number of companies is in 0 to 1 million, right? Like, but the problem is, as an agency, the economics don't really make sense for you to spend time working there. So it was like, we have this vision for helping entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. The bulk of the market is priced out of our services. This doesn't make sense. There's not an alignment from a mission standpoint, and there's not an alignment from a product market fit standpoint here. So the question was like, what do I actually genuinely believe is the right decision for somebody at that stage of business to do? Should you hire an agency? Should you pay a contractor? Should you like, and my honest answer is, I believe at that phase, you should learn to do it yourself. Like, it's the only thing that economically makes any sense, because if you're spending $10,000 a month, you can't pay a freelancer even $3,000 a month as a 30% markup on media. Like, you're not going to be profitable that way. So what we thought of was like, well, we have all this knowledge, we have all these media buyers, we have all this data. Could we build a community and charge people a $250 a month monthly fee, give them, just absolutely over deliver on the value from webinars and data access, provide them a one-on-one coach with our employees, and be able to address more of that market? And that's what we've done with Admission. And it's like, it's probably the area of our business that honestly, like, draws us in the most, because we love it, because the impact is so immediate, right? Like, if you help somebody at that stage of business and they go from making $5,000 a month to $20,000 a month, it's transformative for them, right? And so for our people, one of the other things I love is for our employees, like, sometimes they don't realize how valuable what they know is. And so for them to get to actually see it and feel it, it's one thing when you're working with Igloo and there's a lot going on in that business and you sort of feel important, you sort of feel like you're making an impact, but you don't really know. But when you're talking to Jennifer, you know, from Hot as Hell, and like, you're watching her life be transformed Like that's a different feedback loop that is like really valuable.
Look, and to tie it back again, this is what everybody was talking about. I'm at eCommerce Fuel Live again. Multiple people are like, man, Taylor Holiday, can't wait for this guy. They're talking you up, they're talking admission up, and honestly, I've met a lot of people in this game, and a lot of people aren't authentic. To be fair, a lot of them aren't. There's a lot of bullshit in this industry, and I really expected you to be bullshit too. Like I didn't give you the benefit of the doubt. I was just like, yeah, he's probably a lot of hype too, and then I just kept hearing from people that I knew. Like, give this guy a chance. He's real, right? And you got on stage and you could just see the passion in your voice as you were talking through some of the nerdiest stuff on the planet. And you're pacing back and forth and you're pounding your fist. And I'm like, holy shit, this guy's real, right? And so, like, I love hearing you talk about the mission there and like the real transformation of people who, you're not. How is this described to me? You're not standing on the strip in Vegas holding a Bible telling people to believe in Jesus. You're not trying to get people to start. You're helping winners win more, right? And really being able to pull some levers for them, which is really cool.
And that's such a great point. And like the reality is we weirdly love this one, like what the internet enables, how incredible of a tool Facebook is. Like I like people someday we're going to like realize what we've had here in terms of how incredible this tool is for empowering people and transforming their lives. And the reality is I've experienced it. I watched my brother going from being a bartender trying to act, making like $12 an hour to he has 3 homes across the country because of e-commerce and Facebook. Like I've watched it over and over again transform people's lives. And so I just know what's possible. And I really believe that we were given a gift, dude. I did not do anything to deserve the opportunities that I had. Like I'm not special. I didn't like win some awesome human award. I was given a gift. And so I have no desire but to do anything but to give that to as many people as well, because like people gave me a chance. And if people are eager to learn, I want to talk with them because there's like, that's the best thing in the world. And one of the things I love about this community even is like, yeah, there's some guru shit for sure. But for the most part, like there's people like you and TC. And like, I think about our Wednesday night poker group, Dave, like they're just the best group of dudes ever. And they would do anything to help each other. Like and that's been my encounter over and over again. Is like the community that surrounds eCom is really special. Like what Andrew Udarian's built at eCommerce Fuel, are you kidding me? That's like hundreds of people that show up and like literally all they try and do is help each other. It's crazy. It's really cool.
I think there is, maybe it was just my journey. I definitely passed around to people, gurus or whatnot. And I was just.
Well, you came out of the info product, right? A little bit.
I mean, I would put people on a pedestal and then I'd go meet them and be like, they're kind of full of shit. Right. And so slowly but surely, like you said, poker nights, right? You put this together during this whole coronavirus crisis. And I knew TC, but I didn't know Dave. I didn't really know you either. Right. And what a group of people of like just awesome people who want to help. Another great segue, right? I know your time is short, so let's burn through a bunch of other stuff, right? We all of a sudden, you start a poker game, right? And it's just poker. And to be fair, I'm taking everyone's money. Just thought everyone should know.
You are the current leader. There's no doubt. There's no debating it.
But poker turned into all of a sudden we're getting pitched, right? Like, I exited a company for a high dollar amount. I do want to invest, but how did it turn into, from poker to all of a sudden we're getting legitimately pitched by companies who are looking for VC money right now?
Yeah. So the poker thing started because one, I'm like bored out of my mind in the quarantine era. Right. And like, I have no fantasy sports. That's one of my vices. So like, I am just dying for some way to get my fix here of some healthy outlet of gambling and competition in the middle of this. And I'm just an extreme extrovert. So I miss being around people. So I saw somebody talk about doing this Zoom poker combination. And I was like, oh, this is brilliant. Like, I was like, this is so fun. And I've just loved meeting. I like a lot of relationships and even new hires and people in our ecosystem have sprung out of the D2C community on Twitter. And so I was like, oh man, what if I could get a bunch of people from Twitter to show up and meet each other and play poker? And it was like, I would love that selfishly. So we started with that. And then what would happen is like people would message me and be like, yeah, I don't play poker, but can I come hang out? And I was like, that's kind of weird. I don't know if that would make sense, but maybe if we had a reason for people to show up. And then like I would take these calls. Like I get sent stuff because we buy stuff at 4x400 and we're looking at acquiring some things on the agency side. So I'm looking at deals. And And then I thought about the people playing. Like I know Andrew Darian he's got ECF Capital, and I'm just thinking like, what would be fun? And so that's when we sort of came up with this idea of like, card Shark Tank or whatever, where it was like, could we have somebody come pitch us while we're playing poker and review it? And we all sort of just like, we spent most of the nights before this just sort of bantering about different businesses, right? And like, what do you guys think about this? Hey, what do you think about the Peloton IPO? Like, it was just like, just normal talk. And so it sort of gave us something to focus on. And so I just threw it out on Twitter. I was like, hey, would anybody want to come pitch? And it was like, I got a bunch of responses. So it was like, oh, that's cool. Now we're thinking of having to cut it back because we want to get some more just nonsense talk in there. It's a little too serious now, but yeah, it's fun, man. It's just like, I don't know. I think in these moments of quarantine, one of the things that I've been taught in my life is that in these kind of moments, it's sort of like there's two ways to go about it, right? There's to focus on all the things that suck and have been taken away from us, or it's to figure out what is uniquely possible in the moment. And I think I have found the second approach to be far more useful than the first. And so for me, this is a perfect example of a way that's like, we can't be together, but we can uniquely be together in a way that we actually probably wouldn't have we probably wouldn't have this relationship if it weren't for quarantine and this, right? So,
No doubt.
so yeah, it's been a rad, cool, fun way to just get to meet some cool people and stay connected and get me addicted to sports cards now.
Look, I'm grateful for it, right? Like, I found out, I was going to exit this company in late January, and that's really all I knew for a couple of years. I just was, head down doing that. And then I meet you like a week later, and then turns out you're this Twitter e-commerce god that I didn't know about. Like, Taylor knows everybody. If you want to be on e-commerce Twitter, go connect with Taylor. He'll connect you with everybody else. Also, an amazing place to be. And that, just through following you there, and then coronavirus happens, and then you put out poker, and I'm like, heck yeah, I want to play poker, right? And then I see Ezra Firestone posting about it. I'm like, all right, I definitely want to play poker with Ezra Firestone. So now I'm in this room of like, some people have come and gone, but there's 6, 7 of us that show up every single week, and it just amazing people, right? Like I would have never met Aaron, who's a character playing his trombone while we're playing, or Dave, amazing. I knew TC, but I didn't know him that well, so it's great to get to know him. John Max, so the list goes on of just amazing people that you're connected with. I do want to transition there. Again, I know you're running short of time. I think we got like 20 minutes left. So like, talk to me about the Twitter thing. When did that start blowing up? Because like, I've always been only on Twitter for baseball. Like, I'm a Minnesota Twins junkie. I'm not shy to talk about it. And then I met you, and that really opened up my eyes to the e-commerce world. And man, what a great community. Like, I don't know anywhere else I'd rather be to talk e-commerce than on Twitter right now.
It's wild, man. And it's funny. I'm trying to remember even like how it really started, because I've always been a big Twitter junkie, like huge Twitter fan, but mainly for consumption of news. Like that was like, it was my primary news source if anything was happening in the world. And as a sports fan, it's like, if you're watching the playoffs and it's a Lakers game, like Twitter's your second screen. Like you're just consuming the interaction while it's happening. And that's always been my thing. But I'm trying to remember what triggered it to switch into this e-com thing. And I think a lot of it was, honestly, we put out a few pieces of content back a couple years ago, and I was trying to find some additional distribution for it. Like we had written some holiday, gift or holiday like strategy things, and I wrote a couple articles for Sumo. And so I found Aaron Orendorff, and Aaron at the time was running Shopify's blog. And so I wanted to see if I could get stuff published on Shopify's blog. Little did I know I was just such a naive content marketer. As Aaron still makes fun of me now for this, where I would just give him my content and he would publish it and I'd get no value out of it at all. But he like still makes fun of me for doing it. But so I became friends with Aaron, and then I think he was like somebody that I initially started following. And then it triggered for me that you can basically DM most people on Twitter, which is a really weird experience where like anybody of any size, you can like just directly speak with them, which is a very odd sort of phenomenon. And so I started thinking like, well, who are all the brands that I would want to know? Who are all the people and how many of these people are on here? And it just sort of snowballed from there. And I honestly, I'm trying to think about what the tipping point was where it became D2C Twitter. And I don't really remember, but it just became suddenly like, oh, that person's on here and oh, they're giving out great advice. And oh, this person's on here and they're super kind every time you talk to them. And I think Webb was a big part of it. Webb and I became friends from reading 2 p.m. And
Okay.
so he came out and did some consulting for CTC, and he and I became friends for a bit, and I started connecting with him, and he was really, so it just sort of built little by little to where now it's like, I totally agree with you. It's the best online community I'm a part of, for period. And it's free, it's just crazy.
Yeah. And I'm just scrolling. Usually my feed would be, and to be fair, normally baseball's going on. Normally my feed would be just twins. And I don't see any, like Kurt Elster from the unofficial Shopify podcast, Leanna Patch, Eric Bandholz. Like, I'm just scrolling and that's all I see is e-commerce Twitter now. And I love it. Like I go on there every night for like not gonna lie, probably 45 minutes, and I just download the information for the day because so many people are out there just sharing everything. Like, here's what's working for us right now. Here's all.
It's honestly overwhelming. Like Andrew Ferris, who's our CEO that runs 4x400, our own brands. He and I talk about this sometimes. And sometimes, like, the hardest thing about being a marketer is that, like, you live in a constant state of I'm not doing enough. And if there's anything Twitter has the potential to create, it's a little bit of that. But it's really this overabundance of resource. Like, there are more strategies than you could possibly apply freely available in your feed on any given day. And like, that's a wild place to exist in versus I think about the first time I started a business, and like access to information was like so non-distributed like this. It was non-democratized in a way that it is just crazy what's available to you right now for free.
Yeah, my bookmarks full. Like every night I go in there and I probably bookmark 4 different things. A lot of them are from you. Like you have that UGC flow from Bamboo Earth. I have that saved. I want to implement that in every company I run. And I'm just like, fuck, who has the time to like go through this and every night find 3 new strategies? You
know what my most recent bookmark is right now? Let's trade. You tell me what your most recent bookmark is. I'll tell you what mine is.
All right, I'm looking.
Mine is there's a thread where Gary Vee asks, what's the most overlooked sports card right now? And I went through and read it. There's 500 responses. And one of the ones that I wanted was someone was talking about the 2019 Panini Prism Silver LeBron James PSA 10, his first Lakers Prism. And I bookmarked it to make a note to go see if I could scoop it. So that's my last bookmark.
Nice. My last one is a thread. Somebody best tweets and tips out of his past 12,000 tweets from David Perel, sorted by popularity. And so I just saved it. I started reading it and I'm like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to save this to read all these.
Yeah, nobody's crushing the Twitter game like David Perel, I'll tell you that.
But if I scroll through here, that's all it is, right? Like, find some sports cards, something about the Twins, an e-commerce strategy I want, somebody writing a tweet in the right way that I'm like, I should probably tweet the same thing a year from now and nobody knows I stole it. But like, just amazing stuff. I don't know. Twitter's amazing. And every time I bring this up to people, it's a lot like baseball. They're like, how do you watch baseball? And I'll be like, I'm on Twitter. And they'll be like, how do you do Twitter? I don't know. I don't think it's for everyone. Have you ever met anybody that you wish was on there that isn't on there? And do you know why they're not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish more of our clients were on there, to be honest. A lot of them still aren't. I wish more of my employees were. I have been trying to convince all of my people of the value of it, and they just sort of get tired of hearing me talk about it. So I think they're exhausted by me sometimes. But man, it is like, sometimes it almost infuriates me to the point that I think someone is being wasteful if they're not. Like they are, it sort of triggers in me that thing of like, you have no idea what's around you, don't miss it. And for someone to be like, nah, I don't like Twitter. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that, I just can't even take that position because it's just so much free value that it's just like staring a gift in the face and being like, no, I don't want that because it bugs me. And you're like, oh gosh, do you know what is happening right now?
I think it's cool that there's like a community for everyone on there, right? Like whether you're into Minnesota Twins like me, there's a Minnesota Twins community, or e-commerce, there's an e-commerce community. I would imagine no matter what you're into, there's a community around that on Twitter. It wouldn't take you more than an hour to start finding people who just talk about that stuff, and make a list out of them, or however you want to follow people on there. I don't know. I love Twitter. It's turned me on to many different marketing strategies and really just a lot of cool people that I didn't know exist. Like another bookmark I have here, Kristen LaFrance. I had no idea who she was, and now she's kind of the queen of DTC Twitter.
Yeah, and the thing, people that we have hired, people we're still trying to hire. I'm in conversations with a couple of cool D2C names right now, like just people that are, it's just an unbelievable networking tool.
Well, Aaron Orndorff's one of them, right? Like he was running the Shopify blog and you just totally took him away. Like talk me through that. That's amazing, right?
Yeah. So Aaron, we got to him when he was running the blog to publish some of our content, and he liked our content, and we became friends. So just started trading messages on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and Aaron has so Andrew Ferris, who runs 4x400, he and Aaron have basically are the same human. They both actually used to be pastors in a former life and then aren't anymore. So they both went to seminary together and then ended up in e-commerce and just these really weird overlaps of life. So Aaron came out for a visit and the three of us went to dinner and just hit it off, just became super close friends and thought about the world in a similar way. And I was going through this phase too, where one of the things that I had to overcome in building a business was an insecurity that really smart people would want to work for me. And I could totally see myself managing and helping young people. That was a thing in my mind, was oh, I have experience, I have something to offer them. But I was really insecure about the idea of managing someone with more experience than me, that was more of an expert than me. And that was just a combination of pride. It was a combination of weakness. It was a combination of a lot of things. And I was sort of going through this journey of trying to get past that. And I think Aaron was this attempt at some of that for me, of asking somebody who I think is world-class at something to be a part of my thing and believing that my thing is worthwhile enough for somebody like that. And I think Aaron really helped me to believe in myself in a way to go after talent in a way that's yeah, these people might be interested in this and what we've done is cool. And so it was literally just being direct about look, I love what you're doing. And I think we have this sort of untapped resource of knowledge, information, and data that you could take and tell rad stories with. And I want to give you the keys to do that. And that and paying them a lot of money, those two things help. But I think it's shared vision, it's shared life, and you just learn that there's a lot of things that matter to people. And if you can give them vision for how you can move their life towards the things that they care about, then it's possible.
So is there more people you're targeting currently that you want to talk about, or is that all secrets?
Yeah, they're out there. I don't know when you're publishing, but we're hoping for some announcements of some here soon. I will say, just because she took a new job, I tried to get Kristen to work for me for a long time, and we're really close on some stuff. This is a sort of D2C Twitter out of the bag thing that I was really close to her and Val Giesler coming to run email for us. Val with her kids and her husband who's in the military, it just didn't end up working out. No regrets to either side. And I'm so stoked for Kristen on her new gig at Shopify. And but yeah, I think they're super gifted, and I'm going to keep trying. Every time I see somebody who's awesome, in our world, if you weren't a retired, guy just hanging out on the couch after winning all the awards and collecting your trophies, I'd come after you too.
I've heard you mention it before. I don't know how serious you were there, but look, we didn't even get into half the stuff, and I know I only booked you for another few minutes, so I'd love to have you back on. I'd love to know all the intricacies of 4x400, like how you installed, Andrew Ferris as your CEO there. You're doing a lot, right? And so obviously you can't be doing a lot, and you must have a lot of amazing people in there. We didn't even have a chance to talk baseball cards. I want to talk about all that, but I'd love to have you back on if you're interested. I know you've got a million stories. I hear a bunch of them on Wednesday nights, so I appreciate you being on. You're one heck of a leader, man. I look up to you a lot. I know I haven't known you long, but I appreciate a lot of what you're doing, and I respect you a ton.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate the time, and like I said, I'm happy to swap story anytime because that's what we do, man. And you draw it out of me. And I think we see the world a lot of the same ways. I think we have a lot of shared interests and passions, and so I always appreciate the combo, Ben.
All right, well, you're definitely coming back. I appreciate that. I hope all of you enjoyed that conversation with Taylor Holiday. Definitely go follow Taylor on Twitter. The link is in the show notes. It's at Taylor Holiday. You can follow me on Twitter if you'd like to as well. Both of those are in the show notes, at Ben Knegendorf, at Taylor Holiday. If you want to learn Facebook ads from Taylor and his team, go to youradmission.co, also in the show notes. But definitely go follow him on Twitter. DTC Twitter is where it's at, and I couldn't hype it up even more. If you guys are loving these conversations, please go to Apple and leave a review, or whatever podcast player you're on. Leave a review. Share this with a friend. I know these stories are inspiring, and I'm positive that all of you have one friend who would love to hear this. So I'd appreciate if you could share it. I will look forward to seeing all of you next Wednesday.